Today I'm going to be reviewing the ShockFlo G1 electric vehicle charger. The G1 comes in two different power output options. There's a 32 amp unit that can deliver 7.6 kilowatt to the electric vehicle, and there's a 40 amp unit, which we have here today, that can deliver up to 9.6 kilowatt to your EV and charge it a little bit quicker, provided your electric vehicle can accept that extra power. So before we get into the review, let's open the box and see what comes inside. All right, well, let's take a look at what we have here. First off is the carrying case. It seems like it's made of decent construction, nothing too high end, but nothing too cheap that would rip or tear anytime soon. So the case is pretty nice. We have the body of the unit here, and on the front, there's two buttons. One that allows you to lower the current delivered to the electric vehicle, and another one that allows you to set a delayed charge. If you have time of use, for instance, electricity rates at your house, you could set this so that the EV starts charging later. We'll get into that a little bit later in the review. There's also this little display screen here. It's a tiny display screen, but it does have a display screen. There's a NEMA 1450 plug, and it's a molded plug, which I prefer. Those of you who watch my reviews will note that sometimes I look at these NEMA 1450 plugs and they're not molded. They have screwed on connectors, and what happens is those can loosen up. They let water in to the plug. So this is better that it's a one-piece molded plug. I like that. There's a 20-foot cable. The cable doesn't seem too thick, so perhaps it'll perform okay in our deep freeze test. And the connector, I'm feeling it for the first time. It has a nice rubberized cap here, which is good, especially for these portable units. I really like to see them have protection for the pins when you're going to be taking it places or on the road. Connector-wise, I guess it's okay. It's not a high-end connector. It's all plastic. There's no rubberized grip. There's no grooves for your fingers to grab. It's okay. It's definitely not one of the better connectors, but I've seen worse. Let's do the locking tab test. I like to press both ends and see if I can bend it, and I can. So I do this because this piece here is what's going to be most likely to break on a connector if you drop it. So we like to see this rocking pin here to be made very strongly, one piece, preferably out of metal. So I don't like it when I can press one end and then take the other end and just push it in, as you can see here. So that means that it's not a very strong locking pin. So it's not as bad as the Electron charger I had last time. That had a really weak locking pin, but this isn't good. I shouldn't be able to bend it that easily. Okay, so that's it for the connector. Body of the unit, and over here we have, this is a cradle that you can mount to the wall. If you want to use this as sort of like installed on your wall for daily charging, you would install this like this. We'll install it in a few minutes. There's two screw holes in the back. Ideally, you want to land them on a stud, and particularly because it's a portable unit, you probably have the ability to get one stud. Stud should be about 16 inches on center, so wherever your NEMA 1450 outlet is, you should be able to get this on a stud. Definitely try to do that. Don't use the drywall anchors, and if you can't get it on a stud and you are going to mount it onto sheetrock, don't use these drywall anchors and these screws that they provide you. They're garbage, they're flimsy. Get some good drywall anchors and mount it really strongly to the wall, because this isn't terribly heavy, but you're gonna have the weight of the cable on it. You might be pulling it sometimes, and you don't want that thing to pull out of the wall. So if you can't, you could use the screws they provide you if you're gonna get it into a nice wood stud. But if you can't, you have to mount it on sheetrock. Get some better drywall anchors, in my opinion. Finally, we have the instructions, use and care instructions. So it's only a couple of pages. There's really not much to it because it's not a smart charger. There's no app that you need to learn how to download and pair and all that stuff. And you're not really installing it. You're just plugging it into a NEMA 1450 outlet. So there's not much in there. It just tells you a little bit about how to use the the current switching and the delayed charger and what gets displayed up here. Okay, before we jump into the review, let's take a look at my ShockFlo G1 key features. The ShockFlo G1 40 amp unit costs $279. The 32 amp unit will set you back $219. The dimensions of the unit itself is 12 inches by 4 inches by 2.5 inches. When you put it in the case, it's 17.4 inches by 13.7 inches by 5.3 inches. It is a 40 amp charger that can deliver up to 9.6 kilowatt to your electric vehicle. It comes with a 20-foot cable. It weighs 10.7 pounds. That's with the case. It has the J1772 connector, so it can charge any electric vehicle sold in North America, including Tesla vehicles, although you need that Tesla adapter to be able to charge your Tesla vehicles, and that comes free with every Tesla. So if you have a Tesla, you already have that adapter, and you can use the ShockFlo to charge your EV. It has an IP67 enclosure, which is a high rating for dust-proof and water intrusion, which we'll test out later. It has an operating temperature of 122 degrees Fahrenheit to negative 22 degrees Fahrenheit, which is fairly common with electric vehicle charging equipment. However, the unit is not safety certified. And it's unfortunate because it seems like it's a good unit so far, but it's hard for me to recommend products that aren't safety certified. And one of the things that I don't like is when manufacturers try to almost trick people with the wording when they sell these, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. It comes with a 3-year warranty, and the unit is made in China. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, some people may use the ShockFlo G1 as a portable charger and keep it in that carrying case in their vehicle and take it with them. Others are going to use it for daily charging, and if you do that, it's probably the best idea to mount the cradle to the wall and have the unit attached to the wall. Now, I mounted the cradle here, and you take the ShockFlo then and drop it in. Now you have to be cognizant of where your NEMA 1450 outlet is and the orientation of the plug, because the ground is on the top of the outlet. But if you're going to mount it on the wall like this, you want the ground on the bottom because it's going to turn around this way. So that's why I have NEMA 1450 outlets here installed with ground up and ground down. So this is how you could mount it if you had your NEMA 1450 already installed at this height. If you were to want to use it with the ground up, let's say you had your NEMA 1450 installed ground up, now you're going to plug it in and it's going to be really low to the ground. Oops. So that's probably not the best place to have it mounted. So if you haven't installed your NEMA 1450 outlet and you want to have it plugged in this way, you can install your NEMA 1450 up high here, or you're going to do what I did over here and install the NEMA 1450 ground down, put your cradle right next to it and bend this over like this and plug it in. Now, one thing that I don't like about the ShockFlo is there's no cable management here. You just kind of have to do this, and you know, the cable sticks behind the unit, and there's no place to hang your connectors just dangling. I don't like that. I'd recommend, if you do get the ShockFlo, to get a cable management system and a connector holster. Like, let me grab this one over here. This is made by Electron, and it's available on Amazon or from the Electron website. You mount this on the wall next to your unit, and now you have your cables hung there, and you holster your connector like that. It's a much cleaner and more organized system, and if you watch my channels, you know I like organization. So this is probably a best practice. If you do get the ShockFlo, you're going to use it for daily charging. Don't just have the connector dangling. And if you do have it dangling and you don't holster it, always attach this rubber cap, because you don't want the pins exposed to humidity and dust in the air in your garage. If you're like me, you're always working in the garage, maybe cutting wood or whatever. Contaminants get inside these pins here, and over time foul the connector and can cause it to fail. So you want to keep these pins covered all the time. So use this rubber cap when you're taking it out and bringing it on site to places. And if you're in a garage like this, is either use the cap if you don't have a holster, or buy a holster. And when it's holstered, now the pins are kept protected here, so they're not going to get dirty. They're not going to get moisture on them. It's just best practice for long life for your charging equipment. So I've been using the ShockFlo for about 3 weeks now, and I've been charging my Chevy Bolt EV as well as my Rivian R1S and my Ford F-150 Lightning. It's worked fine, no problems. It's delivering the full 40 amps it's supposed to. One thing I will note is the 20-foot long cable is really the bare minimum that I say is acceptable for cables. I'm having a little difficulty with it with the Lightning and the Rivian. I have to pull both vehicles straight into the garage. If I back them in, it doesn't reach the charge port. And I always say with electric vehicle charging equipment, I like when the cable will reach almost any corner in your garage. Now I know if you were to install the charger closer to where your charge port is, you can then back in or front in, whatever you want. But you make it a different electric vehicle a few years down the road, and then you don't want to have to move the outlet or whatever. It's just so much nicer when the cables are like 23 to 25 feet. That extra 3 to 5 feet makes a big difference. So that is something that I'm really not super pleased about. I wish the ShockFlo had a 23 or 25 foot long cable. Okay, so unit works fine. And I like the little display screen that it has. It shows some really nice information. Now, it doesn't store that information, but while you're charging, you get to see information like the total number of kilowatt hour that you've taken in this charging session, the current line voltage in your home, the amperage that the charger is delivering, as well as the kilowatt draw, which is nice so people could see both the amperage and the kilowatt draw. Now, you could do that math in your head, but some people that are new to EV charging really don't understand exactly how this works. And it's nice to see that you have the voltage next to the amperage, and if you multiply those together, you get the kilowatt draw right next to it. It also shows you how long this current charging session has been going on. And it has an internal temperature gauge, which is nice to see. It's always good when you know what's going on inside the unit, and that's inside the unit. That's not ambient temperature. So it's good to have something like that if you're, for some reason, getting less power than what you should. Maybe it's outside, it's a super hot day, and you see that number is higher than what you normally expect it to be. It could be that the unit is derating a little bit because it's starting to overheat, as many electric vehicle chargers will do. The ShockFlo comes set to deliver the full 40 amps out of the box. But there's a button here that says current that allows you to lower the current. You can lower it from the 40 amps to 32 amps, 24 amps, 20 amps, or even all the way down to 16 amps if you prefer to charge your electric vehicle slower. Now, if your EV can't accept the full 40 amps, let's say you have a 32 amp onboard charger and that's all your electric vehicle can accept, you don't have to adjust this because the electric vehicle is what dictates how much power it takes in. It's going to call for the 32 amps. It's not going to accept 40 amps from the unit. And that's the way it works with all electric vehicle charging equipment. You don't have to worry about lowering the output if you're charging your EV from a charger that can deliver more power. The electric vehicle itself is going to only accept the amount of power that it can safely take in. So there's no need to lower this, but some people prefer to charge their electric vehicle slower and they set it to reduce amperage, and the ShockFlo allows you to do that. Underneath the current button, there's a picture of a little clock and it says delay. That allows you to delay when your electric vehicle starts charging. So you could come home, set this, plug the electric vehicle in. It won't start charging until the time you set. But it doesn't let you set a specific time. It just lets you delay charging in 1 hour increments. You can delay it from 1 hour up to 12 hours. But I'm not really thrilled with that. I'd much prefer if it let you dial in a specific time to let it start charging. And you also have to continually set that. It's not like you can set it for a certain time and your EV will charge at that time every day. You would need to reset this delayed charging every time you initiate a charging session, which can be a little cumbersome if you have time of use and you want to save some money and charge late at night. Every time you plug it in, you've got to reset the time. So, I mean, a lot of electric vehicles allow you to do that within the vehicle. I'd highly recommend you set it in your car so that the car won't call for power until that time. Because if you have to press this every day and keep delaying the charge, and as I said, it only lets you delay it by the hour. So, you know, if you get home at 5:15 and you plug it and you want to plug in now, you could either start it at 6:15, 7:15, 8:15. So if you want to say charge at midnight, you'll start it at 12:15. And I know that's not a big deal, but I'd like to be able to set it to start charging exactly when I want it to start charging, not an hour or 3 hours or 5 hours from the time that I reset it. So, you know, give it a point for having the ability to set delayed charging, but the implementation could be done better. And when you do have the delayed charging feature active, there's a countdown that tells you how long it is until the charging session is going to begin. Next up, it's time for the automatic restart test. With the automatic restart test, I simulate a temporary power failure. If you're charging your electric vehicle, let's say overnight, the power shuts off for a few minutes and then gets restored, you want to make sure that the unit re-engages the vehicle and continues charging. We've noticed some units don't do that. They go into a fault state and then don't continue charging the vehicle once power is restored. You wake up in the morning, your EV is not charged. So what I do to simulate this is I'll plug in my Chevy Bolt EV, and then I'll go downstairs to my panel, shut off the circuit, wait a few minutes, actually not a few minutes, about 30 seconds, turn power back on, and I'll record the unit to see how it reacts. We want it to re-engage the vehicle and start charging relatively quickly, which most units do, but every now and then we come across one that doesn't work. I'll then repeat this test with my Rivian R1S and my Ford F-150 Lightning, just to make sure that the automatic restart works with both of those vehicles also. Okay, well, the Bolt is plugged in and charging. I'm going to turn on the video recording the ShockFlo and now turn off my circuit breaker. I'll be back in a minute. Okay, it already started charging, so that was pretty quick. It passes the test with my Chevy Bolt EV. Now I'm going to try it out with the Lightning and the Rivian R1S just to make sure there's no compatibility issues with those vehicles also. So I did just that and tested it on my F-150 Lightning and my Rivian R1S, and both times the ShockFlo immediately re-engaged the vehicle and began charging as soon as power was restored. So that's definitely a pass on the automatic restart test. Next up, I want to talk a little bit about safety certification. The ShockFlo is not safety certified. It has not been approved by any of the major governing bodies like ETL or UL, so it hasn't been tested. That doesn't mean it's not a well-made unit. It might be very well made, but ShockFlo hasn't gone through that process and have it tested to prove it's safely made and everything is going to be fine. You're not going to have any problems charging your electric vehicle. Remember, and I go over this a lot on this channel, the amount of power that passes through these devices is much greater than almost anything else that you use in your household. And it's really important that they're made well, and it's really important that the outlet that you install it in has been installed by a licensed professional. I'm a do-it-yourselfer. I do a lot of things around my house. Sometimes I get myself in trouble doing things I shouldn't have done, but I fool around and I find out. But one of the things I don't mess around with is when it talks about electric vehicle charging equipment, because of the fact that it draws so much power and it does it for continuous hours, many hours overnight when me and my wife are sleeping, the last time you want to have a problem. So, you know, I beat this drum a lot, and I'm going to do it a little bit here again. When we're talking about the equipment, that's one thing. We'll get back to that. As far as the outlet or the hardwiring of the unit, make sure you get a licensed professional, pull a permit, have it inspected. It's going to cost you a few $100s more. Don't get me wrong. But you know, you spent a lot of money on your great electric car. Don't cheap out on what's going to affect your life and maybe have a serious problem. I have a video coming up soon in a couple of weeks of somebody who had an NEMA 1450 outlet installed by a professional even, but he wasn't a licensed professional that specialized in electric vehicle charging equipment, and he thought he knew what he was doing, and he didn't tighten everything and torque everything to the proper specifications, and person's house almost burned down. So this can happen, and it's one of the reasons why I partnered with my channel sponsor, Qmerit. Those guys over there specialize in electric vehicle charging equipment, and when they do it, you know it's done right. Okay, end of rant. Let's get back to the equipment. So it's not safety certified. And that's probably part of the reason why it's so affordable. The price is $279, which is very inexpensive for a 40-amp portable charger. Right now, there's actually a Black Friday sale going on where it's going to start in a couple of days. And I think it's going to be another $50 or $60 off. By the time this video airs, that will be running, I think, through Black Friday. And you can get one for a little more than $200. So that's a ridiculously cheap price. But I'm certain that that's part of the reason it's so cheap is because it hasn't been safety certified. Safety certification can cost $50,000, $75,000, $100,000. So just think about that. If they sell 2,000 of these and it costs them $100,000, that adds $50 to the cost of manufacturing each one. So, you know, it's almost unfair that some companies don't get them safety certified, and they're competing against companies that go through the process and make sure for their customers that they know everything's safe. We just don't know if the ShockFlo is safe. And another thing that I don't like about it is the fact that when some companies, they almost try to trick you. Now, some companies I've noticed on Amazon literally put the UL stamp on the item that they're selling, and it's not UL approved. And the way they get around that is they say, well, the connector that we sourced is UL certified. But that's not how it works. For something to be UL certified, the whole unit, once it's put together, needs to be tested. You can't say something's safety certified because the cable is safety certified. That's not how this thing works. So, but ShockFlo doesn't do that. They didn't put a UL stamp on it, though it's not UL or ETL certified. But what they do is they do talk a lot about safety certification. And this is the language that they have on the Amazon ad. Certified safe for all EVs. ShockFlo EV charger for all EVs features IP65 waterproof and international certified, providing multiple protections against lightning, current leakage, grounding, low voltage, overcharge, overheat, and overcurrent. And it might have all that stuff, but it has not been certified to prove that all of that's in there and it all works. But they do have this FCC stamp, and people might think that that's a safety certification body, but it's really not. The FCC regulations focus on devices that emit radio frequency radiation. And all the FCC certification means is that the electronic device won't pose a safety risk and interrupt radio communications. An FCC certification does not imply that the product is safe or durable. It simply means that it meets the regulated limits for radiation. So that bothers me a little bit that the Amazon ad kind of implies that it has been safety certified, and it has not. Let's be clear about that. It's possible that ShockFlo is going through the safety certification process. Sometimes companies bring their chargers to market before they're safety certified in parallel with the certification, because it can take months to get ETL or UL certification. So it's possible they're going through that. And if it is, when it gets safety certification, I'll add that to the description of this video. But for now, it's not safety certified. I want to be clear about that. And that makes it hard for me to recommend the unit as much as I like it. So far, everything's been going great, and it seems to be a really good portable charger. But the safety certification is a problem for me. Okay, it's time for the extreme heat test. I've had this heat lamp baking on the ShockFlo. You notice I have it upside down because the heat lamp doesn't go as low as it needed to be normally, but the cradle holds the unit either way, which is kind of cool. So we have it on here baking for 2 hours now. The outside of the unit is 116 degrees Fahrenheit. The inside of the unit is reading 45 degrees Celsius, which is 113 degrees Fahrenheit. I just plugged in my Chevy Bolt. It's pulling the full 40 amps. I'm going to leave it charging for 2 hours. We're going to leave the heat lamp on it. We're going to see how well the unit performs. The ShockFlo does have overheat protection, as pretty much all electric vehicle charging equipment has. At 55 degrees Celsius, which is 131 degrees Fahrenheit, it starts to derate the power that it sends out. And if that doesn't work and it gets up to 80 degrees Celsius, which is 176 degrees Fahrenheit, the unit will shut off. So we're way below that now. But once it starts charging for a while, things are going to get hotter on the inside. So we're going to keep an eye on this. Charge for 2 hours, and I'll report back and see exactly how it performed and if it was able to deliver the full 40 amps for 2 continuous hours with the heat on it. Now, some people might say, why do you put it under such extreme heat? It never gets to be 120, 130 degrees outside. You're right, the ambient temperature doesn't, but if this unit's mounted outside or laying on the ground in a parking lot, black pavement, and the sun's beating down on it, and you live in Arizona or Texas or some of the southern states that get really hot, yeah, the unit can get to 120, 130 degrees. So this is a valid test for people that live in that area. Like the cold weather cable test is important for people that live in the northern states. If you live in San Diego, you might not really care about the cold weather cable test, but we try to cover the needs of all electric vehicle owners when we do our tests here. Okay, so we're going to keep this plugged in for 2 hours. We'll see how it acts. All right, so after 2 hours of charging, we have the results. The ShockFlo did hit its 55 degree Celsius limit where it starts to derate the power. That's 131 degrees Fahrenheit. And it did start lowering the power output. However, I was already getting to a really high state of charge, so I think the Bolt was going to naturally start tapering off at that moment. So I'm letting it charge the full time now. It's been charging for about 2.5 hours now, and we're way down to like 1 or 2 kilowatt as it tops off. And the temperature did continue to creep up. It actually got up to 60 degrees Celsius. But now that it's charging at a lower rate, it's starting to gradually drop down. And this is a pass for me because it did what it's supposed to do. If the internal temperature gets over 131 degrees Fahrenheit, it'll start derating the power till things cool off. But it didn't shut off charging. It didn't stop the unit from charging. It won't do that unless it hits 176 degrees Fahrenheit. So as far as I'm concerned, that's a pass for the ShockFlo. It actually works. It derated the power when it was getting too hot, but it continued to charge the electric vehicle. Well, it's time for the cable deep freeze test. With this test, we try to simulate how well the unit will perform in the very cold weather, particularly if it's mounted outdoors. A lot of people have to mount their charging equipment outside. They don't have an enclosed garage. So what we do is we freeze the units for 24 hours in a deep freeze freezer, and then we see how well the cable performs. We drop the connectors to see if the connectors will break when they're cold and frigid. And when I have these portable chargers like the ShockFlo, I also drop the unit to see how well that holds up when it's really cold and dropped on concrete. So first up, let's see how cold it is inside. It's negative 13 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's pretty cold in there. All right, I'm going to take the unit out now. I'll uncoil it. I coil it up in these small loops to see how well the cable will open up and really work with you. Okay. Okay, well, it is powering up. Looks like it's powering up fine. Now let's take a look at the cable. So it's stiff, but it's manageable. Not terrible. It's not really good, but it's not terrible. So this is definitely fine. It's not going to lose any points in our cable deep freeze test, but see how it wants to remain coiled up? Some of the better performing cables just become floppy and really easy to manage. Though this isn't bad. You know, it's better than most. It's probably not going to get any extra points, but I'm certainly not going to penalize it at all. It's a pretty good cable for cold weather environments. Okay, next up, let's do the connector drop test. While we have it nice and cold, you can see there's frost still on the connector. We drop it 5 times from about waist height and check out the integrity of the connector. A little higher this time. All right. So, seems like it did just fine. No damage at all. And as I mentioned, since this is a portable unit, and let me see, it's all powered up fine now. It's showing all the display, so it's definitely appears to be able to work. Now, it's interesting, the inside temperature is showing negative 26 degrees Celsius, so it's cold in there. All right, let's unplug her and drop the unit. And that wasn't a good drop. Okay, just fine. A lot of frost on it, but it's fine. Didn't even scuff at all, so it's pretty well constructed as far as I'm concerned. All right, so as far as cable deep freeze test, passing grade, passed on the connector drop test and passed on the body of the unit drop test. It seems like it would be a decent choice if you live in a cold weather environment. Okay, while it's still negative 24 degrees Celsius inside, let's plug in my Chevy Bolt and make sure it actually delivers power besides just powering up. Okay, that beep on the Bolt means it's accepting power. The green light's blinking, it's powering up. So even at negative 24 degrees Celsius inside the unit, it'll charge an EV. And for our final test, we're going to do the submersion test. That's a test we do on the portable charging equipment that is IP67 rated. Now, the interesting thing about the ShockFlo is on ShockFlo's website, it says that it's IP67 rated and waterproof. IP67 ratings mean the devices should be able to be submerged in up to 1 meter of water for up to 30 minutes and not have water intrusion. But on the Amazon ad, it says it's IP65 rated. So I'm going by the official ShockFlo website that says IP67 and waterproof, and they even show like somebody spilling a whole bunch of water on the unit. They don't show it being submerged, but IP67 means it's watertight up to 1 meter for up to 30 minutes. So we're going to take the ShockFlo now and dunk it in this water that I have sitting here. Now, for those of you watching my videos, I've been doing this hot with the unit plugged in, and I've had a few catastrophic failures. So I've decided not to do it hot anymore. I'm going to let it be submerged for about 20 minutes, pull it out, just dry it off for a second, and then plug it in and see if water got inside. So I'm going to dunk it in this bucket of water that I have here now and leave it there for 20 minutes. Now, I've waited to the end of the review. The review is done by now because there's a probability that this is going to fail. A lot of these units that we test that say are waterproof turn out not to be waterproof. So the J Plus booster passed this test, and it's a really well-made portable charger. But this one, let's see. So it's kind of floating in here. What I want to see is if there's bubbles coming out of the ends where the cables go in. And there's not. So there's no bubbles coming out of this at this point. That bodes well for it. I'm going to let it sit in here. As a matter of fact, it's going to float to the top. So I'm going to get something heavy and put it on top of it to keep it down to the bottom and fully submerged. Let me go grab something. All right. Got a little Rain-X de-icer. This is heavy enough to hold it down, and Rain-X de-icer gets a free plug. If Rain-X wants to advertise on my channel, they know where to reach me. All right, so I'm going to let it sit in here for about 20 minutes. Looks good so far because there's no bubbles coming out. Some of the units, as soon as I put them under the water, I see air bubbles coming out where the plug enters the unit. And there's no air bubbles, so that means no water's getting in there. Looks good, but we'll check back in 20 minutes. All right, so 20 minutes have passed. I'm going to take the ShockFlo out of the water now, dry her off, and let's see if it works. Tell you, I monitored it while it was in the water. Doesn't appear to be letting any water into the unit. Usually I'll see little air bubbles come out from right here where the cable enters the body. That's where the water gets in. Typically doesn't get in through the seams of the unit itself. It gets in through the cables. So let me dry this plug off really well. You don't want a wet NEMA 1450 when you're plugging in. You don't want any plug to be wet when you're plugging it in, but particularly a 240 volt one. All right. Get this dry. That's nice and dry. Unit's dry, okay. And here we go. It's powering up. Looks fine. Let's see if it charges the bolt. Clicked on, green light's blinking. Bolt says he's charging, so pass the submersion test. So the ShockFlo actually passed every test we threw at it today, and that's pretty good. It seems like it's a well-made unit, but again, until we get that safety certification, we don't know what's going on inside. But you know, ShockFlo seemed to put forward a good score here today, and it's going to be reflected in the ChargerRater score. You know, this is a really good unit, in my opinion, other than the safety certification, which really prohibits me from recommending it. But if they just tweaked it a little bit more, if they got safety certification, if they improved the connector a little bit, I don't like the connector, it's kind of a cheap feeling connector and the tab isn't very strong. If they give it a little bit longer cable, instead of 20 feet, if it was a 23-foot cable, a better connector, safety certification, and you know what, throw one of these in the box. This can't cost more than $2 or $3 to make, because I like the units to have a cable management system and a connector holster. If they did those 4 things, this could be a top-rated portable charger for me. So let's see how things tally up in the ChargerRater. But before we jump to that, I'm going to look at the key hits and misses for the ShockFlo, and then we'll get into the ratings. Okay, we'll start out with the hits. It's very aggressively priced. This is a good unit for under $300. It's a very good unit. Okay, display screen. It's got a nice display screen. It shows a lot of the important information. It's a small screen, but it packs a lot of information in there, and I like that on the portable chargers. Okay, it has an IP67 enclosure, which is very high level of protection from dust and water intrusion. And as you saw in our submersion test, it works. Unlike some of the other IP67 units that we've tested here that failed the test. Okay, for misses, can't hide from the fact that this thing lacks safety certification. It's a big miss there. Hopefully, ShockFlo is going through that process right now. It's not a dual voltage unit, meaning it can't charge from 120 volts and 240 volts. I like it when these portable units can do both, because if you're going to take it with you, there's not always a 240 volt outlet available, but there's always a 120 volt outlet available somewhere. So with these portable units, I really like when they're dual voltage. Okay, and finally, it doesn't have any type of cable management or connector holster. That's kind of an unforced error. It's not that expensive to throw something like that in the bag. It can't cost them more than a couple dollars to include some type of hook or something that you mount on the wall, because as it is now, there's really nowhere to put the cable and the connector. You can't even drape it over the unit, so it's just gonna have to like lay on the ground, or I mean, I'd never recommend doing that. It's gonna force you to buy some sort of a holder, which there's many of them available on Amazon, but ShockFlo should include that with the unit, in my opinion. All right, well, that's pretty much it for the review. The only thing that's left is the ratings. And for that, first up, we're gonna go to the ChargerRater, my point-based system that I rate all of the electric vehicle charging equipment with. Okay, first up, the cost and value category. It gets 3 points because it's less than $300. This is a very aggressively priced unit. And as I said, it's probably because they haven't paid for safety certification. That's the only way they can sell it for such a low price. And as for value, I'm not going to give it any points here. If this was safety certified, it would get 2 extra points. It would be an excellent value. But since they haven't gone through that process, they're not getting any points for value. Okay, that finishes the cost and value category with 18 points. For power and weatherproof rating, it gets 2 points because it's a 40 amp unit for maximum charging power. For adjustable power, it gets 2 points because, as you saw, you can adjust the power all the way down to 16 amps if you'd like. As for weatherproof rating, it's going to get an additional 3 points here because its rating is greater than that of a NEMA 4 rating. When you're converting IP to NEMA, it's not an exact correlation, but IP67 is greater than NEMA 4. It's not quite NEMA 6, but it's greater than NEMA 4, and it allows for complete submersion up to 1 meter of water for up to 30 minutes. So it's going to get an additional 3 points here. It is not Energy Star certified, so it doesn't get any points there. It did pass our automatic restart test. So it finishes up the power and weatherproof rating category with 23 points. Next up, construction and durability. It doesn't get any points for cable length because it's only 20 feet long. For cable pliability, it's going to get a point here. I was deciding whether to give it an average or a good, but after I watched the video again, it's going to get a point. This had good cold weather performance. It was easy to maneuver. For robust construction, I'm not going to give it any extra points there. It's average, no points. For connector cover, yes, it has that rubber connector cover to protect the pins. It's going to get a point there. For connector and holster, I'm going to give it -1 point for poor. I'm not a big fan of this connector. It's not terrible, but I'm not a big fan of it. It doesn't have a holster to keep the connector. I'm not going to give it a 2-point loss on that one, just 1 point, because the connector's not that bad, so loses 1 point. Finishes construction and durability category with 16 points. Next up, convenience and portability. Okay, carrying case. It does come with a carrying case, so it gets 2 points. It is not a dual voltage unit, so it's going to get no points there. It does have a display screen with limited information, so it gets 1 point, not 2. It doesn't get any points for the adapters because it's not a dual voltage unit, and it does have a wall cradle to hold it on the wall, and it's standard, so it's going to get 2 points there. Finishes the convenience and portability category with 20 points. Next up, safety certified and warranty. So not safety certified, -5 points. We hit them hard when they're not safety certified. It does, however, have a nice 3-year warranty, so it gets 3 points back there. And it finishes the safety certified and warranty category with 13 points. And that gives the ShockFlo G1 40 amp a grand total of 90 points on our ChargerRater. A very respectable score for a pretty good unit. All things considered, safety certified to the side, it's a pretty good unit. And when we take that 90-point score and translate it to a 5-star rating, The ShockFlo gets a 4.5 stars out of 5 on the ChargerRater. I then average that with my own personal score for the final score. Now, I really do like this unit. I think you can tell that from the review. I think it's a pretty good charger from what I can see, but I can't see what's inside. And I'm going to hit it there for the safety certification and give it a score of 3.5 stars out of 5. This could easily be 4.5, 4.6, maybe even 4.7 stars out of 5 if it was safety certified. But I just can't put my faith in a product that hasn't been tested, and I know that my followers are going to feel safe using it. So I'm going to give it a 3.5 stars out of 5. And that averaged in with the ChargerRater is going to give the ShockFlo G1 40 amp a final score of 4.0 stars out of 5. Listen, ShockFlo, if you're listening here, please get this guy safety certified. If it passes everything, if you're able to sell this safety certified as is, you could make some tweaks, as I mentioned, maybe a longer cable, maybe make it dual voltage. That would be a major upgrade, but longer cable, include a cable management system, some small tweaks, and this is a really good unit. So it pains me to not give it a better score, but safety certification is really important to me. And, you know, especially don't like it when the advertisements appear that it's safety certified when it's not. And that's something that's, I think, unfortunate. And hopefully ShockFlo does watch this video and reevaluates their position on how they represent safety certification. Listen, if this is your first time here at State of Charge, hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, do all that good stuff so you don't miss any electric vehicle news and reviews. And as always, thanks for watching.